Hello, and welcome to the Cat and Sam show. How you doing there, Miss Cat, Miss Sam? Oh
Miss Cat, Miss
man,
Lamb. Meow. No, I'm doing good. We've finally got sunshine here today. So that is really nice. It makes such a difference.
what's the temp?
About 15, 16, but warmer than it's been, but not exactly hot or anything. We've got the May Day celebrations.
Oh yeah, that's coming up for you.
Yeah. So looking forward to that. So yeah, there's a feeling of spring and summer and all of those wonderful things being in the air.
I think that's. I was just sitting here thinking, man, wouldn't it be fun to have a little cottage out there where I could stay a whole year and understand the culture so much more and kind of take it all in.
Yeah, and of course it's different.
It.
It's sort of different the UK over, but I feel that I feel the same about where you are in the US. And I found out so much more about what maybe my preconceptions of America are versus what different areas are like and stuff. And it's us talking on lots of levels unravels all sorts of information, doesn't it? And we were talking earlier, weren't we, about on your page, was it the war at home?
Actually, yeah, the war at home. I was actually doing a little bit of research because something came across my page about blame, and it was, and then something else that was going on, and I was thinking about how the blame game gets going, and there's two sides to every story. There's he said, she said, they said, he said, she said, she said, whatever the dynamic is. There's always this shift, and in that shift is there's not accountability if we're blaming. And I came across a post that said, blame, no single raindrop believes it's responsible for the flood. And I think when you're in these relationships, you believe that you're responsible for the flood because you're led to believe that you're responsible for everything. So if it doesn't turn out right, it's definitely because
it's your fault.
You didn't dot that I or cross that T.
But and then what's interesting is when when you escape and you come out and you're then you're berated a little bit for taking the responsibility or seen to have taken the responsibility or taken the blame. And there's a lot of victim blaming goes on, even all the way through court processes and investigations, let alone sort of friends and family, however inadvertently. It's in that phrase, how did you let this happen to you?
Well, it's interesting you brought up court, because there was something that I came across about court, which was how come the victim is being taken down in court and not, it's kind of what you and I have talked about, and I know I just did a half statement there, but it's kind of what you and I have talked about with kids. If we know somebody's been abusive that is outside of the family dynamic of the mother, father, and child, then we would be a terrible parent if we didn't protect that child. But all of a sudden, when we go to protect the child, we get blamed for alienation, which is ridiculous.
It's a dreadful situation in that, you're caught between a rock and a hard place, in that, you've got to protect your child or protect any family member or even a pet, because it's not always parental. And yet when you do, and yes, you're absolutely right. We're supposed to be accountable to each other. Any of us standing by and watching somebody else being abused. The bottom line is, for me, it's about zero tolerance. If you don't stop it, then you're enabling it. You're complicit. You might not be able to stop it completely, but at the very least, if you don't call it out. But we are held legally responsible, and as a society, morally, to just stand by and, the knowledge of a child being abused by an adult, and it is abuse. We're supposed to just stand by and do nothing, whilst it's actually not only morally reprehensible, but in a lot of cases illegal. And yet, in the eyes of the law, once you've, or some judges anyway, once you've coupled up, suddenly one person in that couple, one isn't held accountable and the other is blamed for that lack of accountability. It's a completely twisted situation, really is. But I think it rolls out, doesn't it, to wider society as well. I saw a post that was really interesting. It was talking about the similarities in terms of tactics of domestic abuse between that and paedophilia. The grooming and everything's the same. And it's like, why as a society can we understand it when it comes to paedophilia, but why can't we understand it, or can't we front it and confront it as a society and make these and do this strange sort of, I suppose there certainly was victim blaming in paedophilia, wasn't there? So, maybe that's one of the similarities that we've got to get over as a society as well.
I listened to something yesterday that was interesting, and I'm trying to recall the whole thing. We can look at somebody who has a physical challenge, be it they're in a wheelchair, they have to use a cane, and we understand that they have a handicap that is a challenge that is seen. And so I think because the victim is not seen, then we can just blame when that person, the victim, has been hurt. And so if somebody was hurt, if they broke their leg and they were hurt, we would take them to the doctor. We would try to fix that. But in this situation, the victim is coming out of that situation hurt, and society says, well, why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you just open the door and go? What is the reason that you're in court and the other partner who is abusive has the ability to take and manipulate that situation, and people can't see it because they haven't experienced it on a day-to-day basis, because they haven't educated themselves. So they look and they see something and they take their bias and they believe what they've seen. And it's, and the thought that just came in was Sir Patrick oh gosh, I can't think of his last name, Gary.
Stewart.
Yes, Stewart. Who, when his mom was being taken out on a gurney there in the UK after she had taken a beating, the EMT people were saying, Mrs. Stewart, what did you do to deserve to get such a beating? And he said, and he was 10 years old, and he said, my mother did absolutely nothing to receive what she got. And, you know, I give him so much credit as a man to come up and speak against that and say what he had seen and that it was wrong. And, you know, I just don't think that there's enough value given to the victim.
No, and I was at an event earlier this week, and it was a police event, and one of the things that they were talking about is, you know, could people name the skills that and transferable skills that victims are forced to learn through this experience over and above sort of normal human skills, and that, you know, so de-escalation, being able to read a situation really quickly, time management, you know, for not emotional intelligence, being able to not only plan safety planning, not only safety planning in that moment, but safety planning ahead. And I think you're made to take the blame, but also I think taking the blame as well. I think there is an understanding, I don't know about you, but for me, there was an understanding that if I took the blame, life would be easier. And, you know, I suppose that there was a thing where it was almost like it was no skin off my nose to take the blame for something he'd done wrong, if that meant that it was a safer place for us all to live in. What happens is when that becomes a way of life, and that's when you realise you're in a dangerous situation. So even if the difficulty, I think, is even if somebody isn't victim blaming, especially once you've come out and maybe when they've reported to the police and stuff like that, the automatic behaviour still is to almost to take the blame before it's even put on you, you know. So it can be very difficult, I think, for other people looking at it and saying, well, she, whatever it is, I'd say, well, it's my fault, but that's a safety management tool, and I think understanding that is maybe something that happens. It's like, you know, apologising. I think I said to you when I was speaking to some police officers, it was a training day, and I said to them, how do you tell when you turn up at an incident and you've got, you know, two people and there's something going on, how do you tell who's the victim and who's the perpetrator? And one of the responses was the one chap said one officer said that the one who is apologising all the time, and it was very critical what he said, actually, not only apologising, but apologising for things they really didn't have to apologise for. And that would indicate then to him who it's how they apologise, the way it's done, would indicate that would be the victim if it was a situation that was unclear. So the self-blame, the blame that they put on you, morphs into self-blame. I genuinely believe as a safety management tool. And when that's recognised, it like most things we talk about, when it's recognised, it becomes so much clearer. But I do think that can make things very difficult for people who haven't experienced it or who don't get it. It gets very confusing for them. How can you say that you're being abused, yet at the same time you're saying, but it's my fault? I didn't do this, I didn't do that, I didn't do the other, or I let it happen to me. Even when we acknowledge, or we're saying we still take that blame, we let it happen to us. And like with what you were just saying about the children, there is definitely child abuse going on in that house, but the child abuse does not come from the protective parent. It comes from the other parent.
Yeah, one parent is trying to survive, and the other parent is causing the issue. And as a general rule, now you can't have two parents that are both abusive, of course, in somebody growing up, but I think blame is just, it's wasted, because in a sense, and I think that's what's another thing that's taken away in that system is choice. I didn't realize I had a choice, because I wasn't offered a choice. I was offered a choice of, I either do it this way or I'm going to pay a penalty. And I may not pay the penalty, but everybody in the house may pay a penalty if I don't get this right.
Well, that's the grooming, isn't it? That's the training. I think probably, the training, the grooming, whatever you want to call it. If like with an animal, if you do something, if it does something, like whether it's like, how they used to have the electric collars on, and it gets an electric shock every time it does something, you learn not to do that anymore. So, yeah, it's
well, it's there's a saying here that came from Dr. Phil a long time ago that I listened to from him. He had a stepdaughter who was on talking to her stepmom, and her stepmom said that she didn't really care for the daughter because the daughter looked like the mother, the ex-wife, the mother. And so she just had a difficult time every time she saw the daughter, and not wanting to give her any grace. She was just made her irritated. And Dr. Phil said something that always makes me crack up, which is, I bet you if I gave her a cattle prod and she got to cattle prod you every time you said something against her, you'd stop real fast. And I thought, that's so true. I mean, if we as a society could get together and just, every time somebody said something that is that abuse, and we could see the pattern of it, and men, women, children could say that's not right, and be heard.
Absolutely. So it's solutions based, which we can talk about at another time. But yeah, I agree with you. The blame game gets nobody anywhere. Even within, the DA community, like, if you talk about one particular cohort, the other says, well, it's their fault, or it's their fault, with turning outwards into a more solutions-based thinking. I think blame is very different from accountability, and there absolutely should be accountability. But blame is different, and I agree with you, and that's what as a society we should start moving to.
Well, and I think you can't say it takes two to tango. You can't say that anymore, because one is inflicting pain, the other is not. And be that the parents are inflicting pain or a parent is inflicting pain and the child is taking the abuse and a parent is taking the abuse, you have to help the people that are hurt differently than you help the person that is abusing.
Yes.
They're different situations. You just can't go off on that anymore. Because we really need to ring that bell about, not doing that.
We do.
And
we do.
Coming up with solutions and that's why we talk.
That is why we talk. I mean, we're not going to come up with all the solutions, but the more we all talk, the more solutions might come to light, the more somebody will have a brainwave, one that we can all go, oh, yes, try it out. There is no failure when you're looking for solutions. So in lots of ways, in that respect, we can't get it wrong. But we are getting it wrong at the moment by if we don't acknowledge it, if we don't talk about it. And that's why me and you are here, isn't it, my darling?
Exactly. I mean, and I'll leave you with this thought. The people have to put their ego aside. There are people hurting out here.
Yeah.
And they can't just leave.
No.
So I'll talk to you in a little bit.
Talk to you later.
Bye, sweetie.
Bye.
Have a good day.